about how your uncle prays. Maybe save that for later, but let's talk about just what are, very plainly, 1-2 words, what are different forms of prayer?
Petition.
Petition.
Gratitude.
Meditation.
Someone said listening. I didn't hear the other thing.
Meditation.
Because you weren't listening.
Meditation. And that's my boss, ladies and gentlemen.
Adoration.
Adoration? Mm. Okay, I'll get maybe some, like more specific.
How about lament?
Lament. Okay, there we go.
Confession.
Confession.
Conversation.
Conversation, there we go. Some others. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned about Wilshire is that the markers are always running out. That's a good thing. It means we use them, right?
Maybe we can throw them away. That is not the building grounds committee's fault.
It's the only thing.
It's the only thing.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's right.
Chant or sung.
There we go. Okay, chants. Sung prayer.
Silence.
Silence. Aha, I was waiting for someone to say that. Any others? Has anyone ever prayed with beads? The rosary, maybe, if you're a Catholic, or?
Yeah.
That's
Contemplative.
Contemplative? What about like corporate prayer, right? Like if we're in worship and we're doing a litany, like a back and forth, where you're reading the bold piece and someone's standing up reading the other piece. So it's corporate prayer. Any others?
Where does the Lord's Prayer fit into that? It's kind of one we always say.
Yep, yeah.
I'm gonna mention one that I don't think is a good one, but it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Rote prayer.
Can you say that again?
Rote, just saying it for saying it and not meaning it.
I don't think I've ever heard this word before.
Rote?
R-O-T. Thank you. Y'all are teaching me today.
So I'm not saying anything negative about Catholicism, but sometimes the rosary can be rote.
So
Hail
It is
Mary, full
rote.
of grace, Hail Mary, full of grace, and not really meaning it.
Okay.
But rote prayer can happen in any, not just Roman Catholicism, anybody.
The Lord's
Say it
Prayer can be
rote.
right.
Wait, give me a definition for rote. I want to understand this word.
The Lord's
Learn
Prayer.
about
The
repetition.
Lord's Prayer is
Okay.
a rote prayer.
Okay, this was not on my SAT vocabulary list.
Yeah.
We say it's something we say.
Repetition.
Repetitive
Okay.
without meaning.
without meaning it.
Family blessings are like that.
Mm.
And if you're a Baptist that's used to praying contemporaneously and you marry into a Catholic family, you are hijacked to give all prayers at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and any other event because bless this, our gifts, blah, 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 doesn't cut it. So that's where you're
Okay.
used.
Looking it up, it says
Well, a little bit.
habitual repetition.
You know,
You might
Okay.
think I wrote in the morning like a certain.
I'm about to use this the rest of Lent because that's just kind of the repetition, the habit forming. That's
Yes.
kind of my jam where I'm feeling
That's,
let in. Rote.
George,
Just
maybe
think
it's more
it-
of a Yankee word. I don't know.
No.
Well, just think of it as you're reading something that somebody else wrote.
I got you. Oh, that's good. That's good, Bill.
You don't get to leave a good thing without learning something
Okay.
new.
Having been a Catholic and knowing Catholics.
Yep.
A rote prayer, what Baptists would say is a rote prayer, is for Catholics, many Catholics, part of their worship. It's more of a chant, it's more of the repetition, it's not so much the word.
Liturgical,
Right.
I think.
It's not
That's a
necessarily
good
bad.
Yeah,
Ritual,
yeah,
liturgical.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I
Not
want.
necessarily.
Let's stay here because I really like that point of, for some people, the rote prayer maybe they're already written out or something that you say every week. It is boring. It gets to a place where you're just saying things just to say them. It doesn't maybe actually mean anything to you.
Now I
It's
lay me
like,
down to sleep. Now I
Yes,
lay me down to
that
sleep.
one.
right, and it's like, yeah, what am I
used to
saying?
scare the snot
But
out
for
of me
other
as a little
folks
kid
in
when
other
my
traditions,
grandmother did
that repetition, that's a way to enter into maybe a spiritual place. It's familiar, or it's, I guess the way that I describe it to folks of what that repetitive prayer means to me is that so many days I don't know what to say. Right? Like so many days I'm like, man, I've had such a hard day. I can't put this into words. I'm just too tired, right? Like I just want to sit here. But like the words that I've said over and over, like they say it for me, right? And it's like God knows, even if I'm saying the same sentence every night or whenever I engage in the spiritual practice, for me at least, and this is just my experience, is that it ushers me into the presence of God in a way that I am not able to that day, or that my own words and what I'm thinking of isn't going to posture me in a way that's maybe authentic, right?
What about the word charismatic? I bring that up because sometimes in the Catholic world where I was, Catholics who would see other Catholics kind of rebelling against the ritual stuff, they were going off in the weeds like other faiths and free-form kind of prayers, and they would label that as charismatic.
Totally. And I will say, just up front, a lot of y'all know my story, not everyone knows my story. I've been a part of, like in my 25 years, pretty much any type of denomination or church you could think of. I've been a part of, I've actually haven't been part of the Catholic Church, but I've been a part of the Episcopal Church, so I feel like that's Catholic light. And kind of, I understand most of the concepts, not everything. I can't tell you, I haven't memorized a Hail Mary, but I can pray the beads. But I've also been a part of charismatic churches, where you're actually expected to, at least the charismatic church, there's all types of charismatic churches, right? The church I was a part of, it's like, it was all about your words. And your words also, like, they better mean something. It's not intellectual. It better come out of the heart and be passionate. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different type of prayer. And what I've learned, maybe what you all have learned on your journey, depending on where you're coming from, what faith traditions you've been a part of, if you've been a part of maybe more than just Wilshire or Baptist churches, is that no prayer is wrong, but the intention behind it, I think, really it sets a stage for what prayer actually is in your life. For me, prayer looks like a variety of different things, many like this, and I often need more than one type of version of prayer. I often need more than just, let me close my hands, right, and think about what do I want to say to God. Like, that's a lot of pressure. We put a lot of pressure on that form of prayer, and oftentimes, I think in Baptist spaces especially, that form of prayer is, I don't know, I think, the pressure is the way that I would say it. Like, there's pressure to say, even to stand up in front of you all and to pray in front of you, if I were to do that right now, that's a lot of pressure of like, how am I supposed to encompass all that's in this room, right? But the intention of, let me sit underneath the presence of God, let me sit in the heart of God. I think that's a common theme throughout a variety of these. I'm going to open the book because we're here to talk about this book. But actually what I want to read is N.T. Wright opens the week with the Lord's Prayer. I don't know who said the Lord's Prayer. And the book of Matthew. And so I'm going to read these verses for us. It's Matthew 5, 1 through 2. And then he skips over to 6, 5 to 15. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the hillside and sat down. His disciples came to him. He took a deep breath and began his teaching. When you pray, you mustn't be like the play actors. They love to pray standing in the synagogues and on street corners so that people will notice them. I'm telling you the truth. They have received their reward in full. No, when you pray, go into your own room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in there in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will repay you. When you pray, don't pile up a bunch of jumbled heap of words. That's what the Gentiles do. They reckon that the more they say, the more likely they are to be heard. So don't be like them. You see, your Father knows what you need before you ask him. So this is how you should pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, may your name be honored. See, I just added my own words because that's what we're used to saying. That's not what the scripture says. So this is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, may your name be honored. May your kingdom come. May your will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. Give us today the bread we need now, and forgive us the things we owe, as we too have forgiven what was owed to us. Don't bring us into the great trial, but rescue us from evil. Yes, if you forgive people the wrong they have done, your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. But if you don't forgive people, neither will your heavenly Father forgive what you have done wrong. And if you have your book, I'm reading now on page 40, but a few paragraphs down, Wright writes, Jesus contrasts the sort of praying he has in mind with the sort that went on in much of the non-Jewish world. We know from many writings and inscriptions that many non-Jews did indeed use multiple formulae in their prayers, these long, complicated, magic words which they would repeat over and over in their anxiety to persuade some god or goddess to be favorable to them. So that's kind of the background of like why the Lord's Prayer, why this repetition of simple words is needed. Because in their context, they're having people pray in anxiety kind of constantly all over the place. It's not centering, it's not about getting to the heart of God. It's like, oh my gosh, life is crazy, and that's their prayer essentially. And so Jesus offers a way that helps us step back, to center us, and to get into the heart of God. A little further down, Wright writes, prayer is one of life's great mysteries. Many people pray at least sometimes. Some people in many different religious traditions pray a great deal. This is the part I really want y'all to hear. At its lowest, prayer is shouting into a void on the off chance there may be someone out there listening. At its highest, prayer merges into love as the presence of God becomes so real that we pass beyond words and into a sense of his reality, generosity, delight, and grace. What do y'all think about that? Of prayer as its lowest, or just speaking unto a void hoping someone is listening. At its highest, prayer merges into love as the presence of God becomes so real that we pass beyond words and into a sense of his reality, generosity, delight, and grace. Does that resonate? Do you feel
It
that?
doesn't with me in that I think sometimes at our lowest,
Yep.
where we're just desperate,
Yes.
that's where we go. I think,
I think so.
I don't think God sees it as the lowest, but I think we feel it as the lowest, and we aren't sure, we just aren't sure what to do.
And that's how I read it too, of at my lowest, that's what my prayer is. And I think has to be. I don't think that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a
No,
negative
no,
thing.
no.
When we call out to God, hoping someone's there listening, I think that's a really holy act. I don't know if that's what N.T. Wright meant, and I disagree with N.T. Wright about a lot of things, actually. But I think that,
Yeah, I think he's getting at this thing that we all kind of probably experience, which is where the human range is that far.
Mhm.
That the capacity inside this skull of ours is that big. We can be so despairing, lamenting, that we can just beg, speaking into a void. And it just echoes out, right? It just echoes into the universe. Right? And there's nothing coming back here. And then there's other times you're praying, and it came back around. It was like a boomerang, and it's like, and you can't stop it. And it's just, it overwhelms you because it's so much love and so much of this. I was talking to a guy, the guy that trains me actually, and says this. I've done train my mind, he's working on my leg, or lost my function, my trainer. And when we were talking about this idea of what that looks like in light, what colors does he see when he's experiencing God speak to him. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
So that's how big it is.
Yeah.
It's pretty big
Yeah.
extreme.
George, I think about proximity, what you just talked about is proximity. And I think this is the secret to the Christian faith. The Christians blow right past, which is in our faith, the proximity of God is inside of us. And when you're shouting into a void, you've forgotten that God's not way out there. It would be insane for me to shout at someone who's sitting right here next to me. I'm not cognizant of what is real.
Yeah.
And it's just fact that many times we fail to understand that, the transaction for us, this mystical transaction for us of God in us, allows us to communicate all the time, with a God who wants to be communicated with all the time. That doesn't mean that there are times where we feel like God's way out there.
Absolutely.
But that's not reality.
Yep.
That's not God's reality. That's us, being in the sense of not, I would just say it nicely, of forgetting the resources that are available to us, inside of us, that are to be a very large part of us.
I want to sit there for a second. It's beautiful. And talk a little bit about what I've been learning about and how God's been speaking to me in this season of my life. This isn't mine. This is from Thomas Keating. Thomas Keating created this practice called centering prayer. I have sheets over there at the end if you want to learn more about it. Centering prayer is all about what you just described, of accessing God within us, of listening to God, not reaching out. Then when I say that, don't hear me say that reaching out to God, calling out to God is a bad thing. In fact, there's a quote in here. It's on page 45, towards the end. Jesus had come to know his Father the way only a son does, not by studying books about him, but by living in his presence, listening for his voice, and learning from him as an apprentice does from a master, by watching and imitating. Thomas Merton has a quote. My life is a listening, his is a speaking, being God. My salvation is to hear and respond. And so what centering prayer does is recognizes these are all of our levels of awareness. Our ordinary awareness is what we live in 99.9% of the time. It's just how I'm looking at images, I'm talking to you, we're talking about prayer right now. This is all ordinary awareness. Even when we go into worship, maybe not the whole time for you, depends how you experience worship. If you're just kind of sitting there in worship receiving, then that still is ordinary awareness. The spiritual awareness is that in which I think what prayer helps get us to. I'm going to write out, I may not know, wrote. Shoot. I may not know wrote, but I do know the words kataphatic.
Come on, girl.
And apophatic.
And you're telling us that was an SAT?
These are seminary words.
You delivered
Wrote.
Wrote. So these are Kataphatic, apophatic, they can mean a lot of things. There's kataphatic theology, apophatic theology. What I'm thinking about lately and learning about is kataphatic prayer and apophatic prayer. Kataphatic prayer uses words. It's in our ordinary awareness and tries to get us to the spiritual. It uses words, it uses images, even when we do, so Lectio Divina, if anyone here is familiar with the practice of Lectio Divina, it's a spiritual practice, beautiful one. It's meditative. That is still kataphatic because you're focusing on words. You might be in this spiritual awareness, but you're still kind of producing something. You're focusing on something. There's other spiritual practices, the examen, the Ignatian examen. Pretty much any Western practice really out there are these, especially in Christianity. It requires some sort of thought. The Lord's Prayer is kataphatic. The rote prayers are so kataphatic. And they get us from this ordinary awareness to this spiritual awareness. We're beginning to feel in our body, in our hearts, in our mind, this spiritual presence that is around us. But then there's this inner center, divine awareness. And this is something that can only really be accessed through apophatic prayer. And even in apophatic prayer, it takes practice. It takes training of the mind and of the heart, because we live in such a busy world. You are all really smart people, at least most of you, not Charlie. That was my payback.
I know what road it is, so.
He always has a better comeback. Oh man, I set myself up for a long week. But apophatic prayer, this is more of an Eastern practice. So I think most of us in here know that Christianity was started in the eastern part of the world, not the western part of the world, in parts of Africa, Middle East. And apophatic prayer is whenever you hear of a monk or a hermit, these early Christians that devoted their life, got rid of everything, sold everything, and quite literally felt that the closest way they could get to God is to literally live in a cave, sleep in a cave, and have nothing around them, because they wanted so badly to figure out this divine awareness. And they felt that the only way they could truly do it was to seclude themselves from all of society. Now that's extreme. We don't need to go become hermits. I'm not saying we should go live in caves, except nowadays, some days I want to be able to access this divine awareness. And quite honestly, before I learned centering prayer, I had realized that I don't think I had ever actually encountered this divine awareness. I kept God so intellectual and kept God so material, and I had to put words to it, that until I finally understood how to unleash the divine awareness within myself, I was also having a hard time seeing the divine in other people. Like this is, I know this maybe sounds kooky to some folks, and that's totally fine. Like I'm a kooky person, I'm totally fine being labeled kooky. But in apophatic prayer, we don't have words, we don't have images, we're not making requests to God. Like what else do you need to know about apophatic prayer? So this is really where we understand that God is beyond our understanding. And if you're someone that has gone to college, or maybe you've got some more degrees and went back to school, or you just enjoy taking in knowledge, this could be really hard for us to fully understand that God is beyond understanding, that we here at Wilshire Baptist Church, we don't have it all, we don't fully understand God. The church down the street doesn't fully understand God. A lot of folks, we choose to be Baptist, right? We choose to, like, this is our home, this is our community. But there's so many other religions and traditions and ways of being in the world that understand God just differently. And they help, if we learn about their traditions, we learn about their religion, we can learn some of their practices. And I'm saying all this because apophatic prayer is not just a Christian idea. This was something that was developed, centuries ago. Essentially it's sitting in silence and training your mind how to sit in silence. And that's definitely not just a Christian idea. But I think that Christians can and should use apophatic prayer because we have lost our divine awareness. We have intellectualized so much that just getting to the spiritual is hard for us. It's hard to do in a church service, especially if you're someone that works in ministry. You're constantly thinking about the logistics, or if you're just someone, you've been here a long time, you care about the logistics of things. That's where you're probably spending a lot of your time, is ordinary, maybe spiritual, in a worship service. But this divine awareness is something that I think can really only be accessed by you as an individual, because it does take training. It takes training your mind. So essentially, Thomas Keating in the 1970s, he was at a monastery. He was a monk for a long time, and he realized what he was experiencing, this divine awareness, was something that needed to become accessible to Christians, because Christians, especially in the Western side of the world, we were really intellectualizing. We really lost what Christianity meant. And so he's like, we need to find a way to help Christians in an accessible way get back to this. And so he created what he calls centering prayer. And again, I have instructions if you want to try it out over there, but essentially it's sitting in stillness and the quiet and trying to get rid of all the thoughts in your mind, of emptying yourself. And something that I've learned about from Cynthia Bourgeois, who's a student of Keating's. She writes an incredible book called Centering Prayer and Inner Awakening that I've used for the past couple of years, learning about this, and just reread it recently with Pathways and Charlie and Maggie. But what I love about the emptying piece of it is that the goal isn't to be empty, because that's not realistic for us in our society and the way we've been trained to be completely emptied. But she really emphasizes emptying, the ing piece of it. If it's a process, the whole goal is to continue to empty ourselves, not to become fully empty, because truly, unless we spend years in really intense training in a cave, turning off our minds, it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. Again, might sound kooky, but I encourage you to just try it. Something that's helpful when it comes to centering prayer is you pick a sacred word. It can be any word. For me, in this Lenten season, my word is still, S-T-I-L-L. And that word, you don't focus on the word, but it serves as a windshield wiper. So as you're sitting there in silence and you're trying to get to this divine awareness, or like the heart of God, if that's a phrase that makes more sense. If you're sitting there trying to get to the heart of God, and your mind gets busy, and you're thinking, I've got all this stuff to do. I forgot to send that email, shoot, I need to get back to that person. When is this going to be over? When am I going to get to this divine awareness? Is this even worth it? Your word, for me, still, is used kind of as a windshield wiper. Just lets the thought go. You don't get mad at yourself. You just let it go. So that's kind of a lot on centering prayer. But that's the apophatic.
Can you not get to what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Can you not get to apophatic through kataphatic? I can pronounce road. I can't pronounce those words. But I was just sitting here because one that I use is from Richard Rohr, but it's by that Cynthia person. And it is, be still and know that I am God.
Yep.
And you say, be still and know that I am.
Yep.
And do that several times. Helps me get from there.
Yes.
That helps me get to there.
That's the phrase that I use to chant into my practice a lot of times, is the be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still, be. And do that a few times, because it's so hard, right? To just like, okay, I'm gonna sit in my chair, like be silent. We have to kind of usher ourselves into the stillness, into the presence of God. And so finding that's why some people have mantras, if you've heard that phrase, a mantra, something just to kind of say to, and it could be something that you grew up saying, right? It doesn't have to be someone else's words, or there's no right words, but something that is meaningful to you, that helps you recognize the Spirit of God and kind of usher you into the space. If you're into some of this stuff, like a singing bowl, sometimes if you chime it, that can kind of begin. So a singing bowl, I should have brought it. If you go to Sacred Space, this is my plug for my 9 o'clock service that I'm hosting with Darren and Katie throughout Lent, is 9 to 9:30. I know it's early, some of you maybe have kids or, but in McKee Chapel, we're hosting just a quiet 30-minute space, and we use to chime the hour instead of a bell. It's just a singing bowl. I don't know how to describe it. It's a bowl, and technically, like you can go around with a I don't even know all the words, a magic wand, and it makes these. Charlie would know about the vibrations. It makes certain vibrations that are meditative and have been used across centuries. But I just like it because it's just a good ding. It just dings me into my practice. It's like, okay, we're starting, and then when I end, I like. It just sounds nicer than that. You know, like I'm gonna start a meditative practice, but yeah, a singing bowl. You don't have to have one. I'm just saying it's good to start.
Is walking a labyrinth, is that apophatic?
Technically, that would be kataphatic, but I think that walking a labyrinth, especially when you get to the center, a lot of times people sit or stand when you get to the center of a labyrinth. I think that stillness, you can get to apophatic. But walking a labyrinth is a great way to explore getting from ordinary to spiritual so you can recognize the divine.
Georgia, this is something I do for what it's worth. I think it falls over on the right-hand side because I don't have to say anything, conjure anything for it to happen, but I'll do it right now, which is to say, as I sit here, there's two kinds of lights coming into this room. One we made, one God made. I focus on the one God made. Okay. There's God things in the room, there's human things in the room. We are all God things in the room. We forget that. If it's living, it's a God thing. We don't do it. And that helps me to focus on getting to this middle, what you call divine. If it's by our hands, most of the time it's ordinary. And we overemphasize things that are by our hands because we're very proud of them. But you know, the air in this room is a God thing. We don't see it. We desperately need it. We can't live without it. We push it out of our mind, never think about it. It's essential. It's God thing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of Richard Rohr, here's a quote by him that I enjoy. It says, "Great spiritual traditions balance the kataphatic way, knowing God through words and ideas, with the apophatic way, knowing God through silence and unknowing." And so a balance of your prayer life is good. And I just want to challenge us that throughout Lent, you know, Lent being the whole point is that we're getting rid of the things that no longer serve us. A lot of times we think we know what's best for us, so we use the words that we think that will usher us into the presence of God. We use, you know, our knowledge and our intellect of like, I know so much about God, I know so much about faith. But even stepping away from that and not gripping so hard onto who we think God is, and to letting go and to just being still in the heart of God and seeing what happens. Yeah, does anyone know what time we're at? Just want to make sure we're not.
10:40. Beautiful.
What do y'all think about, like, why is this is hard? Even the kataphatic, the sitting time in silence, focusing on a word or meditation, or the examine, which is a review of your day, if you're familiar with that practice. Even sitting in that kind of silence is really hard. Why is it hard for us? What stops us from prioritizing silence and maybe more of an apophatic type of prayer?
George, I was thinking about your use of the word still. It was just in the last handful of years that I kind of heard that whole concept of, if you're trying to still your mind, letting the thoughts go. You use that expression of just letting the thoughts go. Man, I used to just ruminate on stuff, and that's was really, as I tried to pray or tried to be in quiet time, I didn't understand how to do that. So that's an interesting point that you make. That's a recent learned skill for me.
Thanks for sharing that.
been processing grief through this. So, in what, second year? And, it's really remarkable to go to experience. And I was telling someone this week that I'm grateful for the grief because it led there. But without it, I wouldn't have gotten there. I don't think. It's too in my head, too scientific, too traumatized by the material world. Still do that. But my goodness, so that's a little bit like heaven on earth for me. That is like, there's relief, like, of lots of stuff. So I like what you're saying.
I think heaven on earth, I think the connection for me in the middle is the word incarnation with apophatic and kataphatic. That really, it's a Venn diagram, that's the overlap.
Yeah.
There's also good apps. I use Headspace, which has a lot of, to sort of get you into meditating. And when I take the time, to your point is, when I take the time to use it and don't just brush over and start the day doing something else, I find it's really helpful for the rest of the day.
I'll just write these on the board. I know we're at time. Scott just mentioned Headspace as an app. These are two other apps I have found really helpful, Ritual and Second Breath. Those are kind of, obviously not apophatic, because apophatic is silence, but it helps you get into your spiritual awareness, to try to reach the divine, to get to your center, to train your mind, how to become still, because I'm an athlete, I think very much in terms of you have to train yourself. And I think I found that very true. This is a physical, mental, and spiritual practice of prayer and meditation. It's not just, type of prayer we're praying before we eat a meal. So these are two other apps that I have found that are spiritually focused. Well, cool. Do you pray at the end? Do you have a?
We'd love it if you would pray us forth.
Okay. Can I pray for us? And
Thank you.
we can. Thank you, guys. God, we thank you. We thank you for community and rhythms and practices that help us usher into your presence. God, we are so busy and we are so tired. We so often don't know the way forward, but God, we want to be with you. Would you help us this week to quiet our minds, to be still, and to listen to what you might have to say to us. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. If it was kind of kooky and hard, that's totally